What's happening, everyone? Welcome to the Leg It Podcast. Before this show starts, I just want to take a minute and tell you all about the secret perks you get if you sign up on Patreon. Now, to sign up on Patreon, it is £1 a week, that's it. And by doing so, you get early access to all our guests. You get an extra episode on a Wednesday that is only available just for Patreon members only. On a Saturday, we do a betting show where we've landed some pretty big bets, to be fair.
Yeah, cross footy and boxing and MMA.
We do live events, quizzes, you get early access to all them, and anything else we've got going on, it all comes to you first for those who support on Patreon. No better time to sign up. We've got about 100 episodes maybe of Patreon episodes, which are hilarious, if I do say so myself. All there available for you now. Get signed up. It's £1 a week, and we'll see you over there. We're back, and we've got our favourite barmaid again. Keris, 2 beers, please.
Of course.
Just want to take this moment before we get into it to say a massive thank you to everyone who has messaged, grabbed us in the street. We've had phone calls, messages about the first 2 Lifecasts. Been massively positive. Loads of people getting involved. I think it's hit home to a lot of people as well. So
It's done what we set out to do, hasn't it? So far,
it's got people talking.
it has.
Over subjects that I think are really important and probably don't get spoken about as much as it should. So massive thanks for the support, and we go again.
We do, and this week it's when I very first met you, there was something that you said that stuck with me ever since, and it was, if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to change rooms. First of all, where did you get it from, that saying?
Where did I get that from? I will have robbed it from someone.
Yeah.
I don't actually know where I've got that from, but it's a cracker. It's one of my favourites.
And it's something. Thank you very much. Cheers. Yeah. It's something that stuck with me ever since, and what I'd like to chat to you about is how you've lived that. Let's talk about you being a Marine first. There must be something about that camaraderie. There must be something. I mean, literally, they get you to a point where you'd die for one another. Mm. How do you get to that point, by the way? Because you leave Liverpool to go to, I think it was Scotland, you said you went at first. How do you get to a point where genuinely you die for one another?
I don't know how the Marines do it in a sense, but just from a personal point of view, I thought it was amazing. It's to the point where now, sometimes when I work in the corporate world, I sometimes find it astonishing. It's credit to yourself and the other leaders out there, how they get so many people from all different backgrounds working together as a team. So for me, when I joined the Marines as a young 17-year-old, I was someone who loved sport, I loved keeping fit, I loved pushing myself. And then I found myself in an environment where everyone around me was young, loved fitness, loved pushing themselves. It was very easy to kind of gel with these people and get on. Obviously, not everyone got on with everyone, but in general, my network was young, fit, aspiring, motivated people. So it was very easy for me to be like that. And then what you find as well as a young 17-year-old thrust into Royal Marine training, 60 guys from all over the UK, from 16 to 26, I suddenly was then merged with them, and my level went up a lot. Mm. Because before I joined the Marines, I was obviously just training on my own, running round Bootle. Yeah. And then suddenly you thrust in with these people, and because their level was like that, it was just a natural thing that my level then went up. So I do think it's really interesting when you talk about your network, because I think for the military it's a little bit easier because you've kind of got that as a byproduct, whereas how civilian businesses do it, I don't quite know.
I think we should point out as well, I think when we talk about network, we don't mean like your business network or what we'll talk about in a bit, I think is everybody around you, whether it's friends, family, anybody really that can influence your opinion positively or negatively, I would say, we mean by network.
Yeah, and I said before as well, I think what's so important for me is your attitude. I think that's arguably number one in everything in life. But I think it's closely followed by your network. And like you say, it's your personal network, you know, your family, your friends, the people who you choose to surround yourself by. It is massive, and I think just as important as attitude.
When you mentioned, you touched on something there where you said like almost people would drag you up. And you also mentioned in the Marines where you all kind of shared the same, it might have been ambition or motivated or, I'm guessing, I was going to say how important that, but I'm guessing it was everything in order for you to, was you competitive in that environment?
Yeah. And that's what I mean.
Is it that what drags you up in that situation? If somebody can jump that wall or do, Is it your own internal competition that drives you, or is it them telling you it's not good enough, Andy, you can do better, or everything?
I think it's a bit of everything, but for me personally, it was a case of the 60 guys who were turning up in Royal Marine training. You know, you do not want to be at the bottom end of that. Do you know what I mean? You want to be kind of close to the top. So just straight away, by being around people who are super fit, you're having to raise your game constantly every single day. And I think that's what, when I think about network, like you rightly point out, it's not just about a professional network, it's about everything. And by me being surrounded by these people who are pushing themselves every single day, it made me want to sit there and go, I want to do it. And then suddenly, the standards that the Marines had, they didn't actually really matter then anyway, because you're getting spurred on by everyone else.
Yeah.
And that for me is the big thing. And I liked what you said before as well, because I see him on one of these bloody Instagram quotes or something, and it's a great point, and it's like, you know, you can help people up and you can give people opportunities, and that's one thing, but not everyone will always come with you. But one thing's for certain is everyone can be pulled down. You know, not everyone can be brought up.
Yeah.
Everyone can get brought down.
Yeah.
And that's all down to your network and the people you're surrounding yourself by.
It's interesting, even from a kid, when I was playing 12, 13-year-old as a footballer, I was always a tall, big lad. I've always been a big lad. So when I was 11, 12, 13, I was a really good player. I wouldn't say I was technically good, but I was the best player in the team by miles. We'd lose 6-4 and I'd score 4. Right, it was that. And I hated being the best player in that team. I wanted to win stuff. And from the age of 13, I moved to teams, and then as I became, you know, an adult and played football on a Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning, I would generally be the worst player in the best teams. So I always searched, even from an early age, to be part of, you know, some people want to be the big fish in the small pond, but I've never really, I don't know whether that was natural or what it was, but I always felt like, and I've played with some phenomenal, like, ex-pros, brilliant footballers and brilliant teams, but I was always by far the worst player. But I'd rather be part of a winning team than a star individual in a...
That's a mindset right there, but one question I've got for you straight away is, how does that then affect you on a personal point of view? Because if you're playing footy with your mates and you're the star striker, or, you know, you're the best player in that sense, but then you've got that attitude of, look, I want to be surrounded by better players, I want to improve more. I think people may recognise that, but might think, oh, I don't want to really offend my mates by not playing with them anymore because I want to be by better players. Did you ever...
I think what happened with me is, because I had so much tenacity and I was so competitive, that I raised my game. So I remember playing for teams, right, from say 21 to 26, in really good leagues where you get a little bit of money every now and then, and our Sunday league was the best team around. And I was one of the worst players, I would say, but I didn't play the worst because I was consistent every single week. I don't know, like a Nicky Butt, or, you know, every team has these kind of players. What it did with me is it just completely made sure that every single week I would be at my game, right, where other people had more talent. Subsequently, when I got to 30, I had Ethan, who was my oldest son, and I didn't play for 2 or 3 years. When I went back to my old teams, all those players had left. And all of a sudden, I was one of the better players. And I hated it. I was one of the better players in a worse team. And I used to play worse every single... So I was one of those people, going back to what you said, where I could get lifted up by the environment I lived in, played in, or I could get really brought down. And I actually, if I look at my... I don't know how I've got onto our... But it's onto like football career. But in my 20s, I played for the best teams that won everything, and I was the worst player. My 30s, I played for the same teams, but they'd fallen down by the wayside, and I was a much better player in that team, but my performance was worse because I couldn't bring myself up to play in lesser leagues. Or do you know what I mean? I was really a product of the environment that I was in. And if you put me in an environment, my competitive nature, all these kind of work ethic, competitive nature, not talent, everything around talent, I would probably be more relentless than everybody else on the pitch that day, and they probably all had more talent. That's how it brought me up.
And I think the whole thing of being brought up, I always think as well, like growing up in Bootle, I didn't know that you could go skiing. I didn't even know that, you know, people put these things on their feet and flew down a hill, right? Until I joined the Marines. And then you realise, wow, you can go skiing. The Marines will actually pay for you to go skiing and they will teach you how to get really good at it. Now, no kid in Bootle is doing that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, you don't know what you don't know. I had a great childhood, but I didn't know you could ski. So suddenly by putting myself in different surroundings and different networks, you see all these unbelievable different opportunities. I remember saying to my dad some of the things I was doing through the Marines, just opportunities and just that different mindset of different people that weren't from Bootle, that didn't have that art upbringing. And he'd think, fuck off, what are you doing that for? Or haven't, you know, and it was just so difficult for him to get his head round that my son is now learning to ski. I've never even mentioned the word skiing to him. I think that's I say it's a problem, it's just part of life. I mean, there must have been times like that where you have different opportunities as well and you try and speak to friends and family, and again, just because of your different networks and your different friendship groups, they don't always align, do they?
I think there's a few things here, right? There's one thing where there's people will try and drag you down. So we'll probably touch on that as we talk. There's actually people that are thinking, hold on here, I need to bring Andy Grant down a peg or two, or I need to bring Paul down a peg or two. There's other people who, they just don't know any better. So they will try and bring you down. And they don't, they won't try to bring you down, they just will.
It just happens, yeah.
It just happens. I'll come on to a story about that. Well, I'll come on to it now. I'm the first, where I come from, right, I was brought up in Stockport, and where I grew up, the highlight of, you were successful if you got a job, right? And if you got a job for life, you were, in our community, that was success. Right. You'd done all right. That's what you tried to do. My school, when I was 15, they didn't try to think, where could you go in life? They just thought, hold on, his GCSEs were pretty good for the school we're in. You know, we could probably get him a job here doing. And they actually tried to get me a job to be a mechanic at the time. But I remember thinking, I'm going to just try a bit more here. I'm going to go to, I went to college. And I was from a place called Reddish, which is very working class. There's plenty of council estates around there. You know, that's where I was brought up. I then went to a college in Marple in Stockport, which is actually like £1 million houses, £1 million houses. And I felt like I stuck out there. I was a sore thumb. I was really out of my comfort zone going there. But I put myself, thinking back, I hated every day, by the way. But I couldn't get on with the kids that was there at 17, 18 because their mum and dads had money and stuff. And I remember disliking it, but thinking, I'm just going to see where this gets me to. And then I went on to uni, right? But I remember getting my degree, which was in sports science, my first degree. And I come back and my grandma, we're all from the same area, aren't we, right? We're all from the same village. And she goes, oh, there's a job going. And I was looking for jobs then at the time, like graduate jobs. And she goes, oh, I've put your name forward, there's a job going. And I was like, where at? And she's like, Titterton's, a butcher's. And there's like a local butcher's, you know, in Reddish, you know, there's a square in the village that I grew up in. And it's like, to my grandma, she was going to do me that favour, right, of she could be the next person on that, in my network, if you like, to try and help me by telling Bert, who owns Titterton's, a butcher's, that, you know, I've got a sports science degree and I've got a job for you. And I was telling you the story, and I've said it before, this happens still today. So we're in COVID, and it's about March 2020. And listen, you know the business, some of the people listening might have listened to previous podcasts I've done. I've built a pretty decent business, and I've always reinvested back into that business, but there was just a point in COVID where I'm getting to mid-40s and I thought, I've got to give something back to my family. And a guy called me and said, there's a place, I go Marbella every year with the kids, and I get a call that says, look, we've got a real opportunity tomorrow morning. You're in lockdown, there's ability to buy a derelict property, but you've got to tell me today and you've got to buy it tomorrow. And I'm like, what? Anyway, long story short, he shows me on an iPhone round a property in Spain. And it looks like Alcatraz. You've seen it, and now you've been to it, right? But it was a mess. And I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. Put the phone down, I thought, carry on with your day. It started to play on my mind. It was a big property. It was there was trees growing through the kitchen and it was a mess. But it started to play on me through the day. So I started to log online and think, I wonder if I could do something with that. Then I started to get the idea of my kids playing it. We'll talk about visualization on another podcast, but I started to get the idea of turning it into somewhere my kids could play and I could be the dad and cook the barbecue. And it was all the things that I didn't have early on in life. And it started to I don't know, maybe even romance about, could we do something with that? Now I've gone from we're definitely not doing it to could we do something with that?
Might be quite cool.
So the next thing I do is I go on Rightmove and I go, how much would it cost me to get something like that end product? And I look at it and it's way, way out of my league. You know, it's a fortune, but anyway. So now it's becoming even more so. Now I ring my mum. Me and my mum's relationship, we get on like a house on fire. She works in my business. She controls. It's a bit like Wolf of Wall Street, where the dad looks at the credit card statements every month and says, "What's this?" So I have a real good relationship, a brilliant relationship with my mum and my dad. But I'm sat in the car and I'm 50-50, but now I can see something going on. I speak to my mum and say, "Mum, I've got this problem. I've been offered this property. I've got to buy it tomorrow. It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money." To my mum, it's a fortune. Where we come from, it's a fortune. And it's a mess, but I'm considering buying it. And I sat and listened. I'm looking at the radio as I'm driving down the road, and it's got, mum on it. And she must have gave me 30 reasons why not to buy it. And all the time, after about number 6, number 7, number 8, I thought, this is doing my head in. This is not a balanced view. And I remember saying to my mum, and I felt a bit bad at the time, but I don't feel that bad to a degree. And I said, "Mum, do you know what? I'm going to get off the phone. I won't be asking you your advice on things like this again because you see the world in a different place than what I do. I see opportunity where you see problems. And you've just given me no pros, just 30 cons of why I shouldn't do something that I'm very, very 50-50 on." That's kind of a real long story, really, of kind of talking about the people. I don't think you can get away from people.
She hasn't intentionally brought you down, though, hasn't she? That's just her view on life.
And if you're not careful, your own limitations will be the views of other people.
People you surround yourself by, 100%.
What's the phrase? If you either think you can or you think you can.
The man who thinks he can and the man who thinks he can't are both normally right.
Yeah. Is it Henry Ford?
I don't know who said that.
I think it's Henry Ford from obviously.
But it's so true, isn't it, though? And I think, and that's why I said before, your attitude is linked to your network, because your attitude of having this can-do attitude is linked to the people you surround yourself by.
Yeah.
If you're surrounding yourself by people who are saying, "Oh, I don't really think you should do that, Paul. It's a big risk. That, no. Oh, actually, you know what? It's a lot of money." If you're surrounded by those people, your attitude will probably be a bit, "Yeah, you know what? They're probably right." You surround yourself by people who are a bit more open-minded, a bit more optimistic, maybe, can kind of know the bigger plans, if you like. I say to kids all the time, this is another one of my favourite quotes, and don't ask me who said this either, but I say to people, and it sounds so obvious, right? It's so fucking obvious. But I say to kids, if you hang around with 9 idiots, do not be so surprised when you become the 10th. Now, you could apply that to anything, you know what I mean? If you hang around with 10 lads who are up to no good every weekend, 9 lads, don't be so surprised when you end up in the shit with them one weekend. Do you know what I mean? I always say, you surround yourself by 9 millionaires, one day you become a millionaire. That's what I've done with the running, with the world record. I thought, if I want to be the greatest runner in Liverpool, I'm just going to go and hang around with some of the greatest runners in my city. And just by hanging around with people who are on a greater level than you, and taking in little words of wisdom, little, books that they're reading, podcasts that they're listening to, asking your daily routine. Paul, you're a successful guy. What do you do every day? What time do you get up? What time are you going to bed? It sounds so obvious, but if you're taking on things like that from people around you, or you're taking this on, it's going to massively affect where you're going in life.
But there's a key to that. Now, do you think you could have broke the world record without that network and that team around you?
100% no.
How much, and this probably there'll be a spin-off on this, a lot of things we'll say are interlinked, but how much how much courage, that was the word I was looking for, how much courage did it take for you, an amputee, to go to a running club? Was it easy for you or was it difficult? Because I think a lot of the times going out of your comfort, going into the next level of your network, it takes balls.
Yeah, it's so funny actually you say that. I was trying to break this world record all on my own. I was taking my dog down to Crosby Beach, running 10k, there and back, checking my watch. Is it 37:53? No, struggling to break 40 minutes. And I've done this for months and months. And then I put out a status on Facebook and said, I'm trying to break this world record, can anyone help? Someone commented and said, you need to go and speak to this guy, Tony Clark, best running coach in Liverpool. Rang him up, went and sat on Everton Brow with him, had a chat, and then that was it. He said, come down the running club. And it's funny you should say that, because I thought, I've never actually ran with anyone with two legs. I'd only ever ran with my dog on the beach on my own. So I turned up at this running club and I was a bit nervous, but again, my pet hate at the moment is when people use the word anxiety as if it's such a negative. Anxiety is a good thing. It's when you're nervous and excited at the same time. That's why I try and explain it. So I was a little bit anxious turning up. But I went, you know, like I say, showed a bit of balls, went there, met a few new people, and straight away they were all so much faster than me. You know, I remember doing a warm-up, like a 1.5 mile warm-up, and I was thinking, fucking hell, normally I just get out my car and run for 6 miles and back. Now I'm running 1.5 miles thinking, wow. Then I'm spending 20 minutes doing some stretches, and then we're getting into the session.
Yeah.
And then that's when I knew I'd break the world record. Yeah. Because I'm surrounding myself by people who know what they're doing. They're already well faster than me. And I just thought, I just need to hang on to their coattails for the next 3, 4, 5 months, and I'll easily break that record. So, yeah, it took a bit of getting out of my comfort zone to go and run with these people with two legs, you know, when I've only got one. But I wouldn't be sitting here now running 6-minute mile pace at 10k if it wasn't for that running club. It's a no-brainer.
I've always found, in the early years, my granddad was the person or the male figure that I spent the most time with. And I think one of the reasons, if somebody said to me, oh, how have you done what you've done or got to where you've got to, a big element of that would be seeking out people who've got more knowledge than me. And I think that was driven by my granddad being my male influence when I was a kid. And I think even that is like, throughout my work life, whilst I worked for someone, I would always find who I thought was the sharpest tool in the box or the most experienced, usually the one that was quite long in the tooth, who'd been there and done it. And I would literally, I would just glean from them whatever I could. And I think that is one of the reasons, again, I think that's one of the reasons why I've...
What I'm interested with you though is, it's easy for me to say I want to break a world record, I want to go and run with some incredibly great runners. For you as a business owner and a business leader, it's obviously different for you to kind of, how have you kind of managed to, I don't know, navigate your kind of friendship groups, your kind of business groups and stuff, because it's one thing growing a business and having a network, and it's another thing on a personal level, isn't it?
It is. One of the things I feel fortunate at is that I act for lots of people. So again, if you look at my network, we go back to that word, it's massive. We have 2,000 clients. Some of them are on Hollywood movies. Some of them are WWE superstars. Some of them are Premier League footballers. Some of them are worth hundreds of millions and billions, some of them. And again, it's a bit like going back. I am actually doing today, in reality, people can look at me and think, oh, some people would look at me and go, he's successful in what he does. But in my network, goes back to that football analogy now, you've just asked me the question. If I looked at who I spend my time with over the period of a month and what they've achieved, comparison to what I've achieved is insignificant to what they've achieved. It's actually the theme repeating itself, really, is that going back to the football team we spoke about before. So I feel like I'm always trying to put myself in situations where I'm not saying I'm the lowest performer, but I'm in that quartile.
Just being that sponge, you're just soaking up everything.
Yeah, and it doesn't affect my ego or my confidence. Other things will. That's another podcast on another day. But now you've just asked me the question. Actually, I've just realised, and I've never thought this before. What I actually do in business is what I did in football.
When you were younger,
is that actually I put myself in scenarios where I look at Pete Cowgill from JD Sports, 12 billion. How are you going to compete with that? I don't feel inferior. I just feel like my time will come at a different stage. But what I'm more inclined, what's most important about that is, what can I learn off that character?
I seen an interview with Kevin Hart once, and he said he was obviously started making a bit of money, and he ended up going to, I think, the Super Bowl or something, or he was at some events with Jeff Bezos, from Amazon, and he said he brought one of his mates like up with him, kind of thing, Kevin Hart. And I think his mate said to him, "Oh God, Jeff Bezos is over there," and Kevin said, "Come on, I want to go and talk to him." His mate was like, "No, you can't go and talk to him." He said, "Yeah, he said, "What are you going to say to him?" He said, "I'm just going to say what you do every day. Tell me your day." His mate, this is obviously Kevin Hart says it in a lot funnier way than me, but he was just like, well, that guy is he's the richest guy on the planet.
Yeah.
I want to know what he does every day.
Yeah.
And it was just that kind of thirst for knowledge of like, my ego can go in a box for a minute. I just want to say, mate, congratulations, amazing what you do. I want to learn from you.
Yeah.
And I think if more people could kind of put their ego in a box and just be kind of, I think we'd all learn a lot more.
I think you enjoy your podcast, and I enjoy my podcast. If there's one thing that why I do it, there's all multiple things, marketing, there's practical reasons, but from a pure, I don't know, soulful perspective, I just love to hear stories and learn.
Yeah, that's the same as me. I don't know how many people listen to it. I don't know I don't know any numbers, because I've looked at it. If I can sit with someone for an hour, 2 hours, take something from it, enjoy it, and learn a little bit about them, about myself, about life, then I'm winning. Do you know what I mean? Whether 5 people listen or 5 million. And I think that's been big for me in the kind of, because I've learned so much on the podcast, again, by that little network of listening to people for a couple of hours and learning from them. It's huge.
We were speaking just before we come on air, and we were talking about like your dad might turn around and say, Andy, I'm not saying you can't do that, but you'll say I'm going to Dubai and I'm going to go and speak in Shanghai to Nike, or some of the things you've done. And your dad will look at that and think, wow, or how on earth's he done that, or whatever it is. Interestingly, you could say it to me, and I would be a bit like, cool.
Yeah.
What are you doing next?
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is if you want to grow,
Yeah.
there's a time to be with your dad.
Yeah.
So we're not saying here, what I'm saying is there's a time to be with your mates, there's a time to be with all these different people, but there is a part of that timepiece where we'll probably go out and have dinner after we've done this podcast, and actually it will be more about, I'll be saying, well, but what's next? We talked about on the first episode, we was in Iceland, and that's another group that I've put together to enhance through Kevin Sinfield, is enhance my learning or my motivation or whatever it is. But me and you will go for a beer and we will talk about all the things you've done, but we won't dwell too much, is the truth of it, on what you've done,
past achievements,
or what you're about to do. It will be more on, and beyond that, what's next. And I think that's where groups are important, and individuals.
I think the thing is to be mindful. I'm not saying anyone who doesn't share your view or passion, completely exclude them from your life. Not that at all. It's like you said then. There's a time and a place. And I think it's important to have those different networks of and be mindful of how much time you're giving each one of them. Like I say, I love my dad. I see him a lot, but I know, like you say, there's times for getting advice and there's times for sharing ideas and stuff, and there's also times for going, right, Paul, what do you think of this? And I think you've just got to be mindful of those friendship groups and how much you nurture each one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Last thing I want to say is, and on that, obviously, you come to the Be The Standard groups, and we put that together to try and get
unbelievable idea, that, by the way.
25 people. And one of my best mates, and you know who he is, about 2 weeks ago, I spoke to him and I said, how's it going? He goes, a bit stressed at the moment. I goes, why? He goes, I've been in that Be The Standard group. And he goes, and he's a wealthy guy, he got a nice life. And he goes, but I realised I've been cruising. He goes, there's other people in that group over the period of the year that have done this, they've done that, they've done the other. He goes, and I'm just realised that I'm cruising, and actually I feel like there's more in the tank. And that's the key. We're not saying everybody's got to be going at it hell for leather, but he said, I realised there was more in the tank. I just needed to put a bit more in, and I needed that inspiration.
Yeah.
And by coming to the Be The Standard group, I've been able to see how this person and that person has done that, and that. and I'm about to do the same. And I think
you don't know what you don't know. If you just spend a little bit of time with those people outside your comfort zone, it just might click something, and then that's when it gets the ball rolling, I guess. And that's why I think it's so important, your attitude, but also be mindful of who you're giving your time to. That last famous quote to finish on, what is it? You are the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
So true. Right, anything else on that? I think we're done on that whole, the importance of it.
Yeah.
Like the last 2 episodes, let us know what you think, how important is your network, who are you spending the most time with, let us know your thoughts on it. And yeah, see you next week.